This is the California High-Speed Rail Authority's Board of Directors Finance and Audit Committee meeting for the 27th of July, 2023. Welcome. Mr. Secretary, can you call the roll, please? Here.
Here.
Present.
Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, this morning we'll start with public comments. Before we do those, we'll ask our secretary to let you know how you can address the committee.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good morning, everybody. Before we begin public comment for the California High-Speed Rail Finance and Audit Committee meeting, I would like to go over some important information. For members of the public who had joined us in person and wish to provide public comment, you will be called upon in the order that we have received your card. If you are joining the meeting via Zoom and wish to provide public comment, please use the raise your hand feature located at the bottom of your screen. Or if you are dialing in by phone, pressing the number 2 will raise your hand and put you into the queue. Speakers will be called upon in the order that their hands are raised. Once you are in the queue and your name is called, please click on the prompt to allow your screen or allow your microphone to be unmuted. If you are joining by phone, we will call upon you by the last 4 digits of your phone number. At that point, you will hear a message that your phone is being unmuted. Each speaker will be given 2 minutes to speak. I will remind you when you have 15 seconds remaining. When it is your turn to speak, please slowly and clearly say your first and last name, and if applicable, state the organization you are representing. Mr. Chair, we will begin with the in-person speakers. And at this time, we have no in-person speakers. So, Mr. Chair, now we'll move to the Zoom participants. Mr. Chair, our first speaker will be David Schwegel.
Good morning, Mr. Schwegel.
Good morning. This is David, D-A-V-I-D, Schwegel, S-C-H-W-E-G-E-L, spelled like Schweizer rhymes with bagel. And honestly, very few days go by when I don't get totally teary-eyed by missing that conference, the 16th and 17th of May. But it's hard for me to stay sad because Ray LaHood put out an extraordinary ask. The ask that the federal government step forward and play ball with us on this project. Also, I think of Buttigieg and Biden wanted to throw a whole bunch of resources at Brightline West to get that project up and running. Look for extraordinary synergy that happens on our project once Brightline does get up and running. 3 suggestions for Brightline. First off, go ahead and build Palmdale to Victor Valley as this flying solo, and then collaborate with us on Bakersfield to Palmdale and Palmdale to Anaheim, because we're going to see extraordinary leadership. And finally, take a look at the February 2012 board meeting. I recall when Dan Richard took the gavel and he spoke very authoritatively, and when we had the students with the I Will Ride Alliance staging a demonstration out there in the Sacramento City Hall area. And they came in to participate in public comment, and they went out and did their presentation. So take a look at the February 2012 board meeting. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Schwegel.
Mr. Chair, we have no other attendees, which is the
Thank you, colleagues. We'll now begin the today's agenda. The item number 1 is the approval of the June 29th committee meeting minutes. Do we have any, and if there are no changes, do we have a motion for approval? Okay. No motion for approval?
I'll move.
Thank you. Motion and second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. And we've got, I think, one
I have
abstention.
to abstain. I wasn't at the
Thank you.
meeting.
Okay, thank you. Item number 2, we'll pass on any remarks at this point and go on to item number 3. We have Lisa Moreno with regards to the audit report on senior management auditor. Or by senior manager auditor. Good morning.
Morning, Chair Richards and members of the committee. I am here today to present the pre-award audit or pre-award review of the procurement of the right-of-way the right-of-way services from Merced to Madera. Our pre-awards are, our pre-awards are completed on procurements that are based on qualifications, and they are to help aid the procurement team and the contract manager in the fair and reasonable negotiations of a contract. We review the cost proposals, the elements of the cost proposals to ensure that they comply with the proposed agreement and the federal regulations. Our recommendations are submitted to the negotiation team for incorporation in the final agreement. If you have questions at this time on the specific right-of-way procurement, I can answer those at this time.
Any questions? Yes, Director. Committee member.
It says that you reviewed the entire initial cost proposal submission from Odell Engineering. And then later you state that they were missing several documents. And then, so does that not disqualify them as being non-responsive?
The documents, I'm not quite sure which ones you're talking. Is that a specific issue that we had in there? Number? Was that a specific issue that was in?
Well,
A
this is
number?
just on the report that was presented from Paula Rivera to Ruben Aparicio about the pre-award to Odell Engineering. It's on the very first page.
Okay. So usually we have a list of items that we request them to send in with their cost proposals. And then we look to see if those are all in there. If not, then we have a checklist that we send back to them and ask for those documents to be given to us. And at that time, they did provide those after we had requested a second time for those documents.
Maybe it'd help us also to understand. So when who you're communicating with is, who would you be asking this information from?
For the first round of information, we go straight to Odell, since they are the prime, and we ask them to submit any information that hasn't been provided that we had requested in the first rounds. And they go to their sub-consultants, they collect the data, return it to us. If there is anything else missing, or if we have further questions, then we work directly with the sub-consultants or the prime, whoever is being reviewed by whichever auditor we have.
I see. And so does this all occur then after these consultants or sub-consultants have already been selected by a selection committee or something like that? And now what you're doing is you're basically going through all the documentation to ensure it's compliant with as you say, state and federal requirements?
Yes. So the selection process has happened. And then this is just for us to be able to help the negotiation team say, yes, these are fair prices that they are proposing. And then anything that we have recommendations to, we submit that to the negotiation team for inclusion into the final agreement.
Okay. Attorney,
I think what the committee member Camacho is asking is, were any of these substantive, the kind of error or omission where you would say something was non-compliant
No,
in terms of their bid?
So I guess also getting back to Director Camacho's question. By the time they've come to you, is there actually a selection committee that that makes the initial recommendation on who moves forward?
Yeah, this process is an in-house process that is typically post-award based on the scoring review. And then, but pre-negotiation for final agreement on payment for services.
Okay,
And so we asked the audit team to help review all of the elements of cost price audit versus market rate, where things should be, advise the negotiating team accordingly, and then we implement that into the final negotiation.
okay. So in other words, the selection committee's already selected these subs are the contractors and found them to be compliant apparently. And that was a question I think that Director Camacho was asking. If something was missing, does that rise to, does that go back to the selection committee for any reason? If they've already determined apparently or in their minds that the
Yeah.
respondents are compliant?
I think in this case, it wasn't missing for requirements of the SOQ. It was missing for requirements of making sure that the rates they were pursuing were reasonable.
Okay,
I think just the way it was presented, Brian, in the write-up here, it leads me to believe that when they stated we noted several missing documents.
Right.
However, Odell Engineering were later provided the requested documents and information for a complete initial submission, which then tells me that they did not complete the documents in the initial submission.
I don't think that, again, I'll look to the auditor to see if there's any difference, but my understanding that's not documents part of the qualification submission. It was documents that required for assuring that the prices were negotiated prices are fair and reasonable in the
That
current
is
marketplace.
correct. Yes.
Thank you.
thank you. Thank you. Any other questions? Thank you, Ms. Moreno, very much.
Thank you.
You're welcome. All right, we'll move on to item number 4, the executive summary. Good morning, Mr. Annis.
Yes, good morning, Mr. Chair and members. Presenting today the financial report executive summary, which should appear on the screen. So while we wait for that, I'll maybe go ahead and get started. I think all the board members have, there we go. Board members have this as well in the binder. So we start out reporting our accounts payable, aging and disputes report. No major issues to report here. No late payments in the month. And our level of disputes is about the same, down a bit month over month. Some changes below to note on the cash management report. Our cash balances continue to be very strong due to the sale of about 1.5 billion of Prop 1A bonds in the spring. So we have cash balances at the end of May, just shy of 800 million for Prop 1A, cap and trade about $2.4 billion. And we're still waiting as of the end of May for the May auction to post. So that'll bring in another 240 million. And then our property fund is at $11.6 million at the end of May. I did want to highlight for the committee, the last bullet on the bottom of the page. At the May board meeting, there was an update on the flooding damage in March and I believe February, March and April. We did receive a payment of about 9.3 million from the disaster response emergency operations account to help defer some of the cost of emergency flood work. This is through working with our state Office of Emergency Services, our state finance department, and the team that was working on this in the CP2 management, Robert Campbell, Ben Ruiz, and Garth Fernandez. They helped put the package together to submit and receive a reimbursement. So I want to thank them for that work. So this is, we're still engaged in some of the actual work on the ground. So we haven't been fully invoiced by the contractors for this work, but this 9.3 million was approved again by our control agencies and transferred into our account. And we will continue to account for that as the invoices come in and, give you a final number when all the work is done. At some point, we may ask the board to make a small adjustment to the baseline to reflect this emergency work as well. But the thought was to wait until we finalize the number.
Brian, what have we spent to date? You know?
On emergency work?
Yeah.
I believe we've only been invoiced through May. I'd heard it was around 600,000
That's all.
of invoiced work, but we, estimate this $9 million will ultimately be the cost. And by the way, these are direct emergency costs, so there could be some associated costs from flooding that will come later that would not be reimbursable on an emergency basis if we have certain time-related issues that add cost or things like that. But this is the addressing the emergency work, such as rebuilding roads or things of that nature that were done.
If we exceed the amount that we've been granted, is there any opportunity to apply for additional funds?
There is a certain cutoff that was passed. I think the submittal of the work, forget if it seemed like the clock was about 120 days on some of the work effort, but we'll continue to work with the OES and finance to see if I guess as I understand it, there's the work that we have noted is needed. And perhaps if some of the work effort is more on those particular projects, we might have an opportunity to further reconcile. But I think as far as defining a project, that window has closed now.
Is there any exposure for TIA claims?
I don't know the answer to that offhand. I'd have to confirm more with legal and the folks in contract management.
Okay. Go ahead, I'm sorry.
All right. Go to the next page. This is our administrative report. This is through May, so we have 11 of 12 months completed. For that 11 months, we've expended about 63 million out of our $96 million budget, so we'll come in under budget. We have filled some additional positions, so our vacancy rate is down at about 17.5%, which is lower than the statewide average. And so we have brought that down from 32% about a year ago. So again, more positions filled and 5 filled in May. Next slide. So our capital outlay report, we report in May 145.8 million of capital expenditures on the second line of the top table. And in the bullets in the middle of the page, we show the amounts for the DB contracts, specifically in the Central Valley. CP1, 43.8 million, CP23, 45.6 million, and CP4, 7.4 million. Some of the other issues on the bottom table that contributed to that spending rate were project development cost of about 15 million and book-in project reimbursements of about 9 million.
Brian, I know this question's been asked before. I'm not sure that how clear it is, but with regards to the on the CPs, the percentage of work that's been completed. how does that, is there a way of analyze that in terms of how it comports with how much money we've got left?
Yes, these can tie back as well to some of the data in the Central Valley status report. So in that report, we show the original contract value, the current contract value,
Mhm.
and the expenditures to date. So these percentages are based on that same information. So it's
Okay,
showing the expenditures to date divided by the current contract value. So that's where that comes from.
so we
that-
can conclude then that the amount of work that still needs to be completed is provided for in the budget that has been approved.
Yes, and
Okay.
one thing that's not included in these percentages, by the way, is some of the contingency that we report on a later page. So that to the extent that contingency is added to the DB contracts, that would change the
Okay.
contract value. Next slide, please. So here we are on cumulative total project expenditures since 2006 are about 10.9 billion at this point on the top chart. Below, we show the awarded federal grants through May. And on one of the footnotes at the bottom, we note again that we did receive an award in June, 20 million for the Fresno Historic Depot. So that'll show up in next month's report in the table. Next slide, please.
Brian, do we have a budget for that Fresno Historic Depot?
Yes, the total project cost for that was 33 million in that range. So
This covers about 2/3 of it then?
yes, yeah, it's about 60-40 fund split, 60% federal, 40% state.
Thank you.
And next slide, please. So contract and expenditures report, we have the same number of active contracts month over month, 230 contracts. Total value of active contracts went up about $56 million. And the third bullet down gives you some of the larger changes, contract with Pacific Bell augmentation, 22 million, BNSF, 6.7 million. And then some change orders on the design build contract, which are listed individually in the Central Valley status report. Our small business utilization rate on the table, you'll see up a bit month over month, 23.6%. There was some discussion on this and how we calculate these figures at the last month's board meeting. So we added a couple bullets below bullet. The fifth and sixth bullet are new. So we do report here the small business utilization rate by CP or SBU. CP1 is 25.2%, CP23 18.7%, and CP4 is 21%. All other contracts together are about 28.3%. So that breaks it down in a way that, demonstrates most contracts are running fairly close to that 30% mark. It's the CPs tend to be less than some of the other contracts that have had an easier time to meet that higher goal. We also report in the next bullet a bit of a break among the different categories we track. The disadvantaged business enterprise or DBE category is the federal requirement, and that's 10%. The 3% disabled veteran enterprise, that's a state category with a 3% target. And then the small business or micro business, those are state categories. Those are a bit of the balancer, if you will, that gets us from the 13% from the first two categories to the 30% overall target. And we also report here the overall achievement for each of those programs. We meet and exceed the federal DBE goal. It's 10.4% versus the 10% target. We meet and exceed the disabled veteran business enterprise goal. It's coming in at 3.9% versus the 3% goal. And then again, the balancer there is the 9.6%, which is the what we're achieving on the state small business program.
Brian, how do we get the 30% goal
Established by the board.
by the board?
Yeah.
It's not realistic. I mean, I appreciate it's nice to try to achieve that, but you know, we've never gotten close. And I don't think Caltrans has that goal that high.
Well, I think I just make a couple of comments. We've talked about this at prior board meetings, and I think we want to come back to the board with, I think it's right to have the aspirational goal. I think we have to understand how this is done in state government generally, but I would say this, as I've said before, for our professional services contracts, our A&E contracts, we're hitting the 30% goal roughly. I think this reported 28.3, but some months we've been right at 30. I was just looking, for example, at our design contracts for the Merced and Bakersfield extensions, and those are quite robust. We're doing pretty well on hitting all of the standards, the 30, 10, and 3 on those. As you can see in this chart, that bullet number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, the challenge is the large construction projects that are in the Central Valley. Those are our highest dollar contracts. So that's the biggest amount. This percentage is a percentage of the dollar value. And there we are not hitting the 30% goal. But by comparison, if Caltrans, for example, on a major project has one federal dollar on that project, the federal standard applies. And the federal standard for small business participation is like 12% or something like that. And I think Caltrans is at 17. And so we're also beyond 17. So we do need to have a little bit, this is work that we have ongoing with our Business Advisory Council. And we're looking at how to square, if you will, the way you report this. I certainly don't mind an aspirational goal that says, here's the goal we want to achieve for small business participation. But I think what people have to understand, which gets bureaucratic in a hurry, but small businesses have different definitions under federal standards and state standards. And that's something that as a management matter, we have to deal with. The state of California requires a different reporting scenario than the federal government does. And we have to achieve both. So I'm trying to rationalize this reporting. I don't mind, again, an aspirational goal. I'm very proud of what we're doing. I got to tell you that compared to, again, Caltrans, other state agencies who build mega projects, we're running the show. Okay, but we need to rationalize our reporting publicly, and I think we're doing well. I think we want to keep striving for a big goal, but we got to be real about where it is. What's going to be interesting is we get to the next construction contracts, because those are also going to be high value, and we have to see what we can do to maximize small business participation in those. But it's much more complicated than just saying we need to hit 30%, because that's just not the reality.
Maybe we should just call it an aspirational goal. I mean, I appreciate that, but I don't want to be attacked later by someone coming in and say, you guys didn't meet your 30%. You know, if 30% is an aspirational goal, that's one thing. If it's a goal that we're supposed to meet, that's quite a different thing. So I'm a little nervous of how we present this.
Well, let me just say this, because I do, it's a good conversation. I'd probably like to have it with this body first, and then maybe the broader board. But I've asked our folks who are working with the small business community, Katrina Blair, Pam, Jeannie Jones. We are working on what is the better way to report this stuff publicly, given what the federal and state standards are and what we are trying to achieve. And we will be coming back to you all with proposals for that. So I don't necessarily want to reduce a goal. I think we got to call it a goal, but we also have to be able very clear about how we report these things and what it looks like. And again, from my perspective, based on what I've seen from other agencies that do the kinds of things we do, we're doing quite well. So again, we'll come back to you guys when we've finished some work with the Business Advisory Council and talk more about how we do this. Just keep in mind, different standards for federal and state, different contracts with federal and state dollars in it. As a general matter, professional services contracts, A&E contracts, we're hitting it. The big challenge is on the construction contracts, which is our highest value contracts. So.
Thank you. And just to get back to what Jim said, the board made it very clear back when it did act on this, and it was clearly it's an aspirational goal. I think as years have gone by, we refer to it as the goal, and we ought to make sure we recognize it is aspirational. And secondly, with what management and your team are doing right
If
now,
we
I
just
think it'll
added
be,
that word,
sorry,
we just added the word aspirational
Yeah.
before goal.
Yeah.
I'm just afraid someone's going to attack us
Yeah.
that we didn't meet quote goal.
Yeah.
I-
anybody who did would have to go back to the record, and the record was very clear, but
Right.
there's nothing wrong with making sure that it remains clear in our conversations subsequently.
And Mr. Chairman,
Yes, Mr.
it may be an aspirational goal, but it's the right thing to do.
Absolutely.
And so, to water down the language seems to me to defeat the purpose and the spirit and the intent of creating any aspirational goals or goals in general. But I think that as we move our activity into other parts of the state, we'll find that there's a greater population, a greater opportunity for small and minority and women-owned firms to do business with us.
Yeah.
And in fact, I was going to ask if you could even go for to break this out further, to give us a percentage of those goals that are being met, whether they be under construction or professional services, the difference between the two. And I know, Brian, you've made some statements about that. I just like to see the numbers.
Yeah, gladly. I think what might be helpful for this body is when we come back with a firmer proposal on this, I'd like you all to understand what the state and federal requirements are and how they differ, and then see where we land on that and how we do our reporting and how we want to do our reporting. And I think, and again, easily happy to break down the differences between the construction and the non-construction contracts, because I think you'll see how it shakes out.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Great.
Mr. Annis, go ahead.
And move to the next page of the PowerPoint. Slide 7 lists the contingency summary. So in the month of May, we utilized 27.3 million of contingency. Most of that in CP 23, 16.5 million, and then about 10 million CP4. And our remaining contingency on the far right column there for all the CP specific work is about $2.058 billion left after the May usage. There were no single contingency use that exceeded 25 million, so we don't list them on this page. But again, the CVSR does list the individual change orders in that report. Next slide. So this is our initial preliminary report for the month of June. So at the top table, we show overall capital expenditures for June were about 250 million. There's a little bit of an explanation on this being so high. June is typically high because we do collect accruals, meaning work that's been performed but not necessarily invoiced. The CP design work, I'm sorry, the design build contracts were about the same month over month. The CP 1 and 2, 3 were in the low to mid 40 million range for expenditures. CP4 did about double from 7.4 million to 15.3 million, I think reflecting the higher work that's now ongoing to finish the civil work on CP4. And what's bumping that up then to that 250 million, largest category is the bookend projects. So Caltrain electrification project report about 66 million of work performed that they plan to invoice us on, but they did not submit that with the June invoice. So that's still pending. But again, work that's they indicate has already been performed. And there was about 8 million for the Rosecrans Marquardt project down south with LA Metro that they have not invoiced us yet. But we accrue that revenue because it's ultimately charges associated with the 22-23 fiscal year, even though again, it's not invoiced yet. The bottom right table here, federal grant summary. Just wanted to highlight that for June, we again received the federal raise grant of 20 million. So that's reflected in the second row there. Also, not on this report, but I did want to note, we are currently working on 2 additional federal grant applications. There's a new program called the Wildlife Crossing Pilot Program. And we're working on an application for that would cover some of the cost of monitoring our wildlife crossings on the 119-mile segment. So we have over 300 wildlife crossings on that 119-mile segment. And one of the things we're going to do as part of our mitigation is to monitor wildlife usage of those 300 plus wildlife crossings for 5 years. And so that has a cost of about, I think it's about $2.5 million. And so we're asking through this federal program for a $2 million grant to help federal government participate in that monitoring project. And the kit fox is the species, I think, that drives a lot of the work we're doing there. But that's, again, kind of an existing requirement we have, but we think this federal grant is an opportunity to, again, bring in some additional money for that one. And then lastly, due in mid-August is the second round of a federal program called, I guess the colloquial name is MEGA for Mega Project. And so we're planning to apply for a grant there for the Merced Station project. We had applied last year and were not awarded a grant. May remember California as a whole did not do well in that program last year. We only received, as a state, $30 million for a project in Santa Cruz. We have debriefed with the federal government after last year's round, so we think we know what they're looking for in terms of applications and projects, and they've indicated really they're looking for more standalone project scope. And the Merced Station has some standalone project scope, and it's also, of course, multimodal with planned connections with the ACE commuter rail and the Amtrak rail at that joint Merced Station. So we hope that's a competitive grant application. We'll be asking for about $230 million for that grant application. Again, that's due, I believe, by August 21st. And that completes the financial report.
Thank you, CFO Annis. Any questions or comments? Great job. Thank you, Brian. Mr. Casey, welcome. This is section 11 in our binder, the Central Valley Status Report.
Good morning. We put up the slides. Just to give you an update on slide 2 on the Central Valley status. For the month of May, our expenditures were about $96.9 million for all the CPs, with a breakdown.
Bill, is it possible you can get any closer to that mic? Or...
Oh, sure.
Thank you.
With about 40. Can we go to slide 2, please? Thank you.
Yep.
So our expenditures about $96.9 million for the month of May, 43.8 on CP1, 45.6 on CP2-3, and 7.4 on CP4. For that month, we executed a total of about 12 change orders for about $18.8 million. And our contingency is about $2.058 billion for all the CPs. Our labor for that month was about 1,280 workers. Just of note, in the week ending July 21st, we had 1,429 workers on site. So you can see a considerable uptick moving forward.
Bill, how's the heat affecting those guys?
It's tough. You know, you have to be very careful. You want to make sure you're cautious of heat stroke and heat exhaustion, have plenty of water, shade when available. But it is hard. I mean, it's very hot in the valley. So it's something our contractors keep a close eye on the welfare of the workers. For the CP's progress, structures, we have 70 structures underway of 93 total, no change from last month, and 90 miles of guideway underway or complete of the 119. Again, that's no change from last month. Utility relocations, we have 1,045 relocated, 376 in progress, and approved to start as 12, not start as 403, the total 1836. 11 were relocated in the month of May. Right away, real property. We procured 3 additional parcels in the month of May, bringing to 2,225 parcels out of the 2,293 parcels needed. For the Palmdale to Burbank, our regional consultant has prepared and delivered the authority a review. The authority's review a draft version of the administrative final ERES, which is under review by the authority at this time. And from Los Angeles to Anaheim, the admin draft is scheduled for spring 2024 with anticipated nod rod in late 2025. For the 2 extensions, Merced to Madera and Bakersfield to Fresno to Bakersfield, the LGA. Both our consultants, Stantec and HNTB, are working on the configuration footprint and looking to have the draft complete by December 2023. Slide 5, please. So here's the graphical representation of the 3 CPs, and you can see for the month of May, we had 96.9 million, just under $97 million worth of work. Our risk contingency graphically is $2,058 million. We go to the next slide. $2,058 million. The next slide, please. Our construction labor, of course, for the month of May was at 1,280, and as I mentioned before, we had a high the week of July 21st at 1,429 with daily workers. Next slide, please. Again, this is our construction progress. It shows that the guideway, we're ahead of our forecast numbers. And for the, for the guideway ahead of forecast, and the structures, we're right on target of our forecast numbers. Next slide, please. Utility relocations, it shows for the month of May, the 11 we talked about being relocated. And right now we're ahead of our forecast numbers. Next slide, please. Oh, sorry.
When you say we're ahead of our forecast numbers, how does that dovetail with our schedule?
This is forecast we think we complete, so the contracts can work into their schedule. But it does have a disruption. I mean, doing utilities live in a construction project is tough. So what we do is put a forecast out with the contract so they can plan ahead, so we can plan forward and make a schedule. But it is tough. It does have an effect on construction.
Yeah,
But
I'm
we are-
nervous that we're going to affect our schedule. Like, you know me, budget and schedule are very important.
We're trying to manage both. That's why we put a forecast out. This is a contract can plan for it, and then we cannot not have unanticipated costs.
Are there any big roadblocks ahead of you there?
Well, dealing with third parties is always tough because they have a wholly different set of values. But it just takes a lot of effort, a lot of coordination with people like Dennis Kim and others who are really working hard to make sure we move this forward. Next slide, please. Is the breakdown of the utility summary of note CP4. All of our utilities are approved to start and in progress at this time. So working hard to complete CP4 by the end of the year, fully completed. Real property right away. We delivered 3 more parcels in the month of May. We're on track for a 98% goal by the end of the year. And I believe right now we're about 97% of the parcels delivered.
Is Dennis slowing down on this now?
He's getting tired, but he's going after it.
So we were doing so well. I mean, were those the low hanging fruit and now we're at the top of the tree?
Morning,
Good morning.
board members, Dennis Kim. To your question, board member Gilmetti, is we don't have many parcels left. I think that's why you're seeing this. This is a natural progression of us just trying to get the last parcels. Currently, we have 2295 as of June in terms of what we're trying to deliver. Actually, 2225 out of 2293. So we're at 97%. We're just really chasing the last 3% left. As a result, some of those have started later. So it's a natural progression of just trying to close out those parcels. So really, you're going to see lower numbers, but that's intended. So you'll see numbers closer to about 2.5 for the last 6 months to get us to the 98%.
Is there anything out there that's gonna slow a contractor down?
Not to my knowledge at this
Okay.
point. And if we understand if there's anything that will impact critical path, we're all over it in terms of coordination with the contractor, coordination with the PCMs.
Perfect. Good job so far.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, I'd just like to echo that good job because I know a couple of years ago when we looked at these parcels, we just thought that was a gargantuan effort and it was, and you succeeded. So far. So thank you. Really appreciate the work staff has done.
Thank you very much, Vice Chair Miller.
Let's go to slide 12. So for railroad right-of-way parcels, we delivered 3 more in the month of May. As you can see from the graph, we're ahead of our forecast numbers. Next slide, please. So CP4 is your earned value schedule. If you notice, the schedule performance index is slightly under 1. When you're under 1, it means you look like you're behind schedule. 1 is on schedule, above 1 is ahead of it. So right now, this gives an opportunity to pivot, and we did that. So the month of May, I believe our building was around 7.4 million. The month of June, I believe in the flash report was about 15 million. So the contractors really cranked up their efforts. They're working 6-7 days a week, 12 hours a day, and really going after it, completing the guideway by the end of August. So I expect next month we'll see it move back higher above the 97% mark. And of note, on CP23, while I'm here, we opened type 2 structure Elkhorn Avenue on July 7th. And on CP4, we opened McCombs Avenue that bridges over our high-speed rail system, BNSF, and State Route 43 on July 18th. So we're making active progress. And then the preliminary numbers for June, of course, when you look at total labor, we had 1280 in the month of May. Our preliminary numbers of June are 1345. With regard to right-of-way parcels delivered, we had 2,225 in the month of May. We're looking in the month of June to have 2,230. So you can see the progression forward. For executed change orders in the month of May, we had 18 million for about 12 change orders. And in the month of June, we're looking at 34 change orders and $98.5 million. And then utility relocations in the month of May was 1,045 as a whole. And we're tracking the month of June, the preliminary numbers are 1,068. With that, any questions?
Any questions for Mr. Casey? Can I just ask you to go back to page 3 for a second, or slide 3? Or you don't need to really do it, but with regards to the guideway and structures, I think for the last 4 months or so, it's been, I think, no change.
Mhm.
So maybe it'd be helpful to understand that. And I'm also wondering, can we break the categories that are underway / construction so that our construction complete? Can we break underway and construction complete so we see each of those?
Yeah, on that, we've done that before when I've done the May and November updates.
Uh-huh,
We break those down by in a pie chart.
uh-huh.
And we can use that pie chart here.
Yeah, that's fine. It would be helpful, just so we can see the movement. We
Sure.
don't know, for instance, how many are under construction or how many are complete.
Right.
And then with regards to just that, could you just tell us just briefly what is going on with regards to guideway and structures? And when you would suspect that we'll see movement in terms of an increase of the underway and construction complete?
I don't have those numbers per se with me, but our big push right now is CP4, getting that complete.
Okay,
We do anticipate hitting our goal of the end of August. There's a couple areas, North Current Water District, Semi-Tropic, the canals there that we're working through some difficult problems or constructively solutions, but that's a dot on the map compared to the entire guideway. So we are looking to have that complete. And we're actively working with CP1 and CP2/3s to resolve the TIAs to move forward and complete more of the work expeditiously.
I see. So perhaps what, if I understand that correctly, then on CP1 and 2/3, is there basically, are we kind of, I don't know if this is too strong, at a standstill subject to working out the TIAs?
I wouldn't say that. I would say that, working through a lot of the third-party agreements has been tough. I mean,
Okay.
it's everywhere. I know CP 2-3 has been trying to recover from the flooding. Mostly their suppliers.
Right.
They were flooded out and then they got a huge backlog of work. So they're trying to fit us back in the schedules. But we are looking to get those both moving at a larger clip than they are now.
Okay. Next month, maybe you can have more of that detail for us,
Sure.
and that would be great.
Okay.
Okay. All right, with that then, thank you, Mr. Casey.
Thank you.
And ladies and gentlemen, that concludes the business of this committee for August, or excuse me, July. We'll be back in August. Please join us at 10 this morning for the High Speed Rail Authority's Board of Directors meeting until 10 o'clock. For those of you who can be here, and for this committee at least, we are now adjourned. Thank you.